Hi there. I'm Amity Sandage, and I'm the Environmental Literacy Coordinator at the County Office of Education. I decided to do a quick video recap of the kickoff day one of the Teacher Leadership Institute for Sustainability for those of you who were unable to be with us in person that first day in preparation for our second kickoff day, which is this coming Sunday, October 20th. Looking forward to seeing you there. I'm going to share my screen and go through the slides to give you a sense of what we did that first day. Sorry you were unable to be with us, and I hope this will be helpful in catching you up so you feel connected with what people are talking about. And let me just hide my little thing so that it's not blocking views. Okay, so you can access this slide deck at that tiny URL, tinyurl.com/capital TILIS lowercase day and the number 1. And that was also sent in the follow-up email with all the resources from the day. So we do an opening as a ritual. It's shown that rituals help build a sense of community among groups. And so we open our gatherings with a ritual of some kind of opening quote, poem, or item to just bring us together as a community. And so I introduced this book, The Lost Words, with a poem called Acorn from it. And this book was created, it's poetry that are acrostics, the poems where the word is spelled down vertically and then lines for the poem are created out of that, each letter of the word. And each of the words in this book is a word that was removed from an edition of dictionary that's typically used by schools, by students. And when they revise dictionaries, they evaluate what new words are coming into usage and need to be included, and then they remove words to make space for the dictionary to not be too long. And it was noticed that a preponderance of nature-related words were being removed from the dictionary because they were deemed as being less used in students' lives, and new words were being added that often relate to technology and things that are in modern day phenomena that we didn't have words for before. And so this author and artist made this book to bring these words back into usage and help promote keeping them in children's lives. And so I was really shocked that acorn was one of the words that was in there because that is my nature name. When students go to science camp, they get a nature name that they choose, or sometimes friends help decide what it is. And so participants shared if they already had a nature name, what it was, or they chose a nature name for themselves as one of the connectors at the start of the meeting. So that's what the groups did, and just got to know each other a bit. We also had time for a land acknowledgement, and I shared about a book that I will have at the next meeting. That is a book of interviews, conversations with Native American community members that is edited by a local professor emeritus from Cabrillo College, Stan Rushworth, who is Native himself. And he created this book along with Dar Jamel, an award-winning climate journalist. And it includes interviews with quite a few members of the Amamutsan tribal band because of Stan's long connection to this area. And so it's an amazing resource for hearing direct from our own Indigenous community here in Santa Cruz County, their thoughts about the future of the environment. That's what the focus of the interviews is. And then we just had a welcome. So there's contact info for me, and Joyce Hill is a consults with us on evaluation of the program and is a great science expert. If you need someone, her contact info is on that slide as well. And then these are the new teachers joining this year in this cohort, representing TK grades, TK all the way to 12th, and lots of different content area focuses. Very exciting. We also have these returning teacher leaders coming back to mentor the incoming cohort. And on the website, their green classroom profiles are up there if you want to get to know more about them and their past projects. And these are the environmental education partners that join alongside teachers throughout the program as thought partners, resource providers, and colleagues who are also educators, but in the non-formal sector. And the learning between classroom educators and out of classroom educators in this program is one of the magical things about it. And this program is funded and supported by the Santa Cruz County Office of Education, NOAA's BWET program, the Bay Watershed Education Training Program, Save the Redwoods League, and the Seymour Marine Discovery Center contributes hosting some of the dates. So our county is really, if any place can transition to having truly green schools where all students have an opportunity for nature connection throughout their education, where they're getting robust environmental and climate education to help them become literate in those areas, and where the campuses themselves are sustainable modeling what is being taught in the classroom. Those things combined really are what a green school or a green classroom is about. And if any county is able to do this, Santa Cruz County is. We have amazing progress that has been made and an amazing connection to nature in our region. And it's just an incredible opportunity here. And I thank you all for being a part of leading in this effort from the classroom. The goal of the Teacher Leadership Institute for Sustainability is to build educators' capacity for integrating environmental literacy and sustainability content in lessons, but also action. So students get to take action that actually makes a difference, but it connects to the core instruction that you have. So it's also helping students put into practice the skills and lessons that you have goals of teaching in the classroom already. So that those things are intertwined. And in order to build that capacity, or some of the results of that means we'll see more equitable access to sustainability and environmental literacy education for students. We'll have increased capacity for students experiencing place-based outdoor learning because of these community partnerships that we're creating by inviting those outside partners in. And students will feel more empowered to impact their community and their campus sustainability. So those are the goals. And the program structure includes elements that are learning for the teachers, the participants, both teachers and non-formal educators. So building foundational knowledge and skills together as a community of learners, and also a community of teachers. So networking and coaching with each other and in community, and bringing in experts to help as well. And then a third portion is this idea of kind accountability, where we're holding ourselves accountable and there are deliverables that help us actually implement and reflect on the learning and the program itself. And research shows that including all of these elements is really what's needed to have lasting impact beyond the participant, but even down to the student level. And linked in the slides is an overview on the website and an overview of the expectations in the program. These slides include all the dates, which are also on the website. And these are the deliverables. Basically, everybody who's participating from the classroom will ultimately have a student-driven environmental action project of some kind that is implemented and includes students getting outside of the classroom, doing some outdoor learning experiences that is connected to their curriculum goals, the action project. And then from that, you'll create a green classroom profile. There's a Google Doc template that will be provided. There are past ones created by teachers who were in the program before that you can see. And there's flexibility with the template as well if that is something you're looking for. But that's a deliverable, and one slide with with highlights of your project that will be shared as part of our final share case, like a showcase, but you're sharing at the public green classroom celebration in April. That's the last day of the program. And then surveys to capture the impacts of the program will be also a requirement. So that's the overview and welcome. We did some community building with the group in the next phase of the day that really introduced this concept of environmental identity. This is something that is a measure of how much a person feels that they are part of nature versus separate from it. And it's correlated, having a strong environmental identity, seeing yourself as being part of nature, correlates with a higher intention to take action on behalf of the environment and stewardship activities, essentially. And research shows that the development of a strong environmental identity happens in phases. And these are the phases we discussed. So it starts with having experiences that build trust in nature, where you're getting to go outdoors in nature with a trusted individual. For a child, that might be family or a teacher. And adults often need this phase as well if they haven't gotten those experiences when young. Basically, experiences where you get to build trust enough to feel safe outside. And then you're prepared for independent exploration, the second phase, where you get to explore the natural world with your own senses and learn everything you can about it on your own. And there's actually a lot you can learn in that phase. And that really then builds on the next phase, which is environmental competence, where you're getting education about the interdependence of human systems and natural systems, and understanding those connections in ways that are beyond what you can figure out just with your own senses and independent exploration. So that's often where we think of like curriculum living, where you're teaching about, the carbon cycle or the water cycle, or habitats that maybe are different from the one where a student actually lives. And so environmental competence will be stronger if students have already had the independent exploration phase and the trust in nature phase. And then the final phase is environmental action, where you're taking your knowledge of these systems, human systems and natural systems, and also your motivation because of your connection to nature from those earlier phases to take action on an issue. And that action is informed because you have had those prior experiences in environmental competence as well. So going straight to environmental action without doing those earlier phases is something people can do. They can go and volunteer and do something, but it's not going to be as effective or impactful for the individual, and probably won't be as impactful for the planet as well, because they might not make the best decisions about how to act. if they haven't had all of that prior support for building their identity to this level. So we introduced that concept of environmental identity, and then we spent some time doing independent exploration using hand lenses and modeling, like going outside and having a task, setting boundaries, giving instructions about how you're going to come back and circle up. So, kind of modeling how to go outside the classroom for a few minutes and have an exploration activity that has some structure but allows for that independent exploration to happen. And then people reflected on it and reflected about how at their grade levels they might um, use this. People shared who already take their students outside, tips and tricks from what they have learned that works well. Um, and then we had a brainstorm back at our tables about the other phases in environmental identity development and where in schools we can, what kinds of things we can do in schools that support those other phases, the trust building, the competence, and the action, and created some posters with those. So that was the whole beginning community building section, which also was some content around the environmental identity, which is a foundational framework we use a lot in this program. And then this is the overall agenda. So that first section happened. Then the next sections followed. I'll just walk you through it, but basically the purpose of this first day was to have us identify our common purpose for this work, share our individual, like why we're here, but also find our common purpose together and build a common sense of urgency for the work that will carry us through the program. And then also the what, like what are some of the foundational frameworks that are helpful in this work, and then how, where does environmental sustainability sit in education? What does it look like in the classroom? So looking at some of the how it happens, what it looks like. So our common home was a section to think about all together to get us all on the same page about environmental sustainability, because people come to this work with a lot of different levels of background. Some people come with tons of knowledge about environmental sustainability and environmental science. And others come because they have a very deep connection to nature and they know there are lots of problems and they're concerned, but they don't have a lot of background. And and maybe are also kind of afraid to look deeply at the problems because it's so overwhelming. So this is a chance where we all were able to look deeply at the problem and deal with it in a trauma-informed way so that we can think about how we can do that when we are faced with having to explain things to students that are difficult because of how serious they are. So just thinking about the Earth as a system at first, that all of us at some point learned about the four spheres, the hydrosphere, the water, the earth, the living elements, the biosphere, and the atmosphere, the air, these four spheres that on Earth interact. They impact each other, and they're part of one big system that for millennia has been in balance. Let me move this tool in case it's blocking your view. Okay. So these spheres have been in balance and they make our amazing blue planet what it is. And for millennia, humankind has lived here. So we know that these spheres can exist in balance. That is the way it has mostly been throughout history. And so we know we can get back there. It's a matter of figuring out what has gotten out of balance. So this imbalance has come fairly recently as a majority of people, indigenous people are now a minority on our planet, and non-Indigenous people have adopted a lifestyle that is in imbalance with the four spheres, and probably some Indigenous communities as well who have not been able to continue to pass down their Indigenous practices. Um, and so we now see that our four spheres are out of balance, and these things are threatened that we rely upon. We rely on nature for biodiversity, for our food, shelter, medicines, food. Oh, I said food. Our clean water, our air, soil, and for our own emotional health. Um, and we're in a system where it's helpful to think about um, how systems work in order to solve a problem within a system. So I linked this slide for people who really like to learn about systems, but we did not go into this in depth on this day. But if you're interested in that, you can explore it further. The links are there. So we just touched onto that system in order to look at these impacts and what is happening in the imbalance. And the the human impacts we're seeing fall into these two sort of big categories of what you call these problems. One that we hear about a lot is global warming or climate change. Um, one that people are often a little less familiar about is ecological overshoot. I think we're all very familiar with it, but it's not a term that gets used as much. Ecological overshoot is important to understand because it is actually the underlying cause that has led to the climate change. Um, our natural resource depletion at a rate that is unsustainable, and also the extraction of the fossil fuels and releasing them into the atmosphere, and the creation of the built landscape, which is removing habitat and polluting the environment. And so these root causes are really what we need to solve. Like when we talk about just solving climate change, it feels a little more abstract, or people only think about reducing carbon emissions. And reducing carbon emissions is essential, but these are the root causes. And so we need to look at those as well. And these are the the impacts we're seeing, which I won't dwell on here. We're very aware of them, having been living through them ourselves in our region. And and this tool we took a quick look at through some slides, but this is interactive. You can go to it online. If you have older students, it's an amazing tool to look at ecological overshoot impacts in with a justice lens. This site, you can zoom in on these maps down to the census tract level. So you can go as close in, super close in, to see down to every census tract in the state. And it shows you the levels of pollution, the pollution burden, as they call it. You can pull apart each pollutant map. And so this one is just drinking water pollution, and the dark is more pollution, and the light is less pollution. And so you can see this is Santa Cruz County here, where the highest water pollution problems are in San Lorenzo Valley and down in Watsonville. The pesticides here, a lot of septic systems here, and pesticide use, a lot of on the north coast down in Watsonville, where the agriculture is. And here they layer them, and you see all of the pollution layers to find out where the highest overall pollution burden exists. And you can see very clearly who's got the burden. Down in South County is the highest. And this map also layers together or pulls apart population characteristics that combine to identify sensitive populations, populations that don't have the resources or the capacity to advocate for what they need to mitigate those pollution burdens that they're facing. And so the characteristics are poverty, lower educational attainment, linguistic isolation, unemployment, and there are others as well. And so if people are in those categories, they are less able to get the resources they need to demand and get an unpolluted environment for themselves. And so that's where you see the populations concentrated in our county. And then layered together, pollution burden and population characteristics, this is what our county looks like. So it's interesting when you pull them apart, like when you look at this way, you think, oh, well, there's no problems over here. When you pull them apart, we saw that there were, terrible drinking water pollution problems up in this zone that you don't really see here. So it's a great tool that to be able to look at the reality in every community, and but then also to look at overall justice issues that these folks here are the ones being most impacted by environmental injustices. So this, from there, we went into facing the climate crisis, which is being caused by it's the greatest symptom of all of the habitat destruction and ecosystem degradation that we have been carrying out. And in 2018, a special report came out. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scientists sounded the warning bell about climate change. And this was like when Greta Thunberg really came into the news a lot more. There were a lot of civic action was happening around the planet about we don't have much time left to solve these problems, and um, and these are the impacts that we're seeing already happening in our area. Some of them happening in our area, and some of them less. So we just thought about a little bit like which of these are we witnessing firsthand on a daily basis, once in a while? How is it feeling? How does that impact us? And which are we witnessing more from a distance, both physically and emotionally, but knowing other people are being affected by them. And more recently, in 2021, the sixth assessment report came out and had some very key findings that unequivocally this global warming is being caused by humans with 100% certainty, that we are seeing impacts already here, and they are disproportionately affecting low income, Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, and that temperatures have already increased and will continue at least to the 1.5 degree Celsius mark in the next 20 years. But this bright yellow is our call for hope, because we can still take action to have temperatures peak and decline and avoid climate chaos if we act quickly. So from there, we thought about how urgent this is in terms of schools and how we can have the school system react more quickly. We know that climate impacts are happening in schools already, so bringing that to the attention of our school leaders and asking to prepare and also make changes to address the urgency of this. So we did this role play simulation activity where participants assumed various roles in a school community, and we have data for 4 different decades, but we examined just 2 decades, the 2030s and the 2040s, data that is real data of predicted changes in Santa Cruz County. This is our own data based on CalAdapt and other data models that predicts changes due to climate change if we continue sort of in this mid-level action level where we're at now, instead of if we take very aggressive action, we can end up with our temperatures increasing less over here. And if we did nothing, it could be even worse. So we're in the intermediate lower is what the data we played with was using. And the purpose of this activity was really not to scare people. It's not about that. It's really to help people face the reality in order to shift from having a reactive feeling when these emergencies happen to proactive, climate resilient, climate ready paradigm where we're anticipating, we know these problems are coming. That means we can prepare, and we can also mitigate and make the problems less severe by taking action now, and be prepared for the ones that we can't eliminate. So that's the purpose. Um, and these were the directions for each round. Those are the roles people chose. And these were the data stories that were told, included, extreme storms and sea level rise and wildfires and high heat episodes in schools. And people discussed what it was like imagining that they were in that role with these things happening in their district, and then shared what level of urgency they were feeling. Um, and this is, yeah, that was for people who participated previously, not relevant right now. And then after that, a lot of emotions come up in that activity. And so it's important to model how do you handle those emotions. And since COVID, a lot of schools have social emotional learning as a very high priority. And we know that identifying emotions is a key to self-awareness. So giving people space to identify their emotions around looking at that climate data and naming the emotions builds the foundation for self-management. And then you're able to process and act and work on things, and not be paralyzed by the emotions. And also processing the emotions together as a group after doing that activity is affirming and helps us support one another through this challenging situation we're in. I gave the example of a high school student who attended the Youth for Environmental Action Summit 3 years ago, where students did this climate ribbon activity. Students led it with other students, where students shared on a ribbon. They wrote something they love that they never want to lose to climate chaos and climate change. And they shared that with each other, and they tied it to a ribbon, to one big rope together. And then they acknowledged each other's ribbons and promised to support one another. And that student has come back to participate in the leadership program the past 2 years because they had felt very alone and very anxious about the climate. And having that activity and realizing they weren't the only one feeling that way made them feel normal, like they knew it was normal for them to feel that way. They knew there were other people that cared, and it was so powerful for them to have a name to what they were feeling, climate anxiety. So people in the room, the teachers and participants, have time to reflect and look at that climate ribbon that students and educators have built and add their things to it. There's an outrage board for people to share what they felt angry about and who they wanted to direct that to and what they want them to hear or understand. And then there was a museum of hope and optimisms, a collection of stories of solutions and hope of change toward a climate solution for the planet. And people shared which of the stories were giving them the strongest feelings of hope and optimism. And then we had an activity where we looked at solutions from Drawdown, which is an amazing project that identifies solutions that reduce carbon in the atmosphere, not just carbon, actually, all greenhouse gas concentrations, so methane, other ones as well, which are even worse than carbon dioxide. So these solutions or technologies only make it into their their models if they are currently available. So they're not things people are imagining inventing. They're currently available, they're growing in scale, they're financially viable, they have a net positive impact, and they're quantifiable under different scenarios. And Drawdown has these sets of technologies and solutions that, if implemented, would help us reach net zero as a planet. We would stop adding more greenhouse gases and stop global warming. Um, and so the fact that we have the solutions right here and now is incredibly hopeful. So people did a very fun activity where they tried to guess what the top 5 solutions were, having a bunch of them to choose from, and then got to look at what the real rankings are, and thought about which of the ones in there, because all of the ones on the list are important. They all have to happen to reach that drawdown goal. But only some of them are really things that students can feel very connected to. And so people discussed which of those were things that really connect with students' lives. And then we talked about some more hopeful news, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is reimbursing schools for green energy infrastructure, food waste diversion laws in California. Food waste is a top solution for climate change because it eliminates methane, which is one of the worst greenhouse gases um, that's created when food is put into landfills. The schoolyard forest system, which is a plan for California to have 30% tree cover on all campuses as a climate mitigation and adaptation strategy, and the new mandate for climate change education in all public schools in California starting in 2025 across grades 1 through 12 in science. And then local exciting news that we shared were some of the emerging model elementary schools. Bayview Elementary in Santa Cruz City Schools has reached net zero emissions, the first in Santa Cruz. And Santa Cruz Gardens Elementary School has been, they created a science and garden emphasis for their whole school site several years ago and are now seeing increasing attendance. They're only school in their district to get higher attendance because the learning is so relevant for students and families. And food systems trailblazers in 4 of our districts. We have food systems staff who are really pushing for, local foods, for compostable foodware, trying to reduce waste in the food system. And one district is even planning to go, one K-12 district is planning to go to reusable foodware, which is very exciting. And then several of our districts have really amazing commitments they're making in policy-wise towards sustainability. But students don't always know about all these solutions. So that's part of our challenge, is to connect those dots. So then we had time to reflect, like, okay, we went through all these emotions, the anger, the sadness, the positivity, and how did it feel, and what could you use from this process in your own teaching, and what are you doing in your schools related to trauma-informed practice too that could be tied together. And so there's tons of resources linked in this slide deck. And then we had lunch and explored the what of environmental literacy and sustainability in school system, looking at green schools and what makes a green school. We looked for evidence here and discussed how those fall into these 3 subsystems in schools. We have the campus, the facilities, we have the curriculum we're teaching, and community and culture, the out-of-school experiences and support that schools provide, and lots of all these stakeholders as well. And the environmental work falls across all 3 of these pillars. Ideally, it's integrated. We also shared that there are a lot of mandates and expectations already in place for schools that not everybody is that aware of. And so when there's a law in the books, that's something that can be pointed to. Schools, students can ask school boards, this is a law. Are we really doing it? What are you doing about it? Um, and leaders can be made more aware of like what are these mandates, and we can find out how they need support. And then we transition to the how in terms of the classroom for teachers. And we've found that teachers have all said this has been one of the most helpful parts of this program is thinking about the implementation of this um, environmental literacy integration into schools on a continuum in the classroom. So not thinking that, boom, you have to go straight to like transforming your whole curriculum, but maybe you're just ready by starting out with a little supplement of something and adding some environmental content or taking the students outdoors to do an activity that isn't even related to the environment, but you can take your reading outside and being explicit with the students about why you're going outside, going back to that environmental identity framework and talking about it's building our trust in being in nature, or you're getting to explore. And so finding ways to just supplement what you do in a way is the mildest end of the spectrum. And then getting a little more spicy, um, doing a central focus on the environment within your content area, where you're learning about an environmental problem and about solutions, but it's really driven by the teacher and the curriculum. Um, Integration, where you're looking more about into uh, thinking about uh, across content areas, that you're doing this integration on a more routine basis, not just with one lesson sequence, but through multiple projects in your classroom or multiple units in your classroom. And where more of it is coming from the students, more ongoing inquiry from the students and proposing of solutions. And then transformative is really where it's problem-based learning, solutionary learning, based on environmental problems, and you're pulling your content area goals into that. Um, and so even teachers doing this, like, don't do that 100% of the time. It's part of the time. But if you're somewhere on this spectrum at all, that's all important. We need people on all parts of the spectrum showing what that looks like so that we can have a space for every teacher to see themselves getting environmental literacy into their curriculum. So the supplemental is just as important as the transformative, and then people can move along the spectrum. Um, and that's just the same information, but in a different format that's easier to read for people sitting farther from the screen. And this is just more of what those stages look like. Oh, no, sorry. This is at all the stages. You just want to make sure you're being explicit about the goals for environmental literacy, because otherwise students are like, I'm learning math, I'm learning English, I'm learning whatever. They know what your class is about often, or that time in your class if you're a multiple subject teacher. And there isn't like environmental literacy time in the schedule usually. And so you need to be explicit about it for students to then be in the habit of growing, like, oh, this is a goal for me. I want to be environmentally literate. I'm building my environmental identity. Oh, outdoor learning has benefits to my health, my academic performance. Like, there's all kinds of benefits to outdoor learning, the research shows. So making that clear to the students is key. It's easy to forget. And then the last part of the day we spent in groups where the mentor teachers shared what it looks like in the classroom. Um, Before getting into our groups, we just shared sort of the different types of environmental action projects that they can range from. Like, otherwise sometimes people have one thing in mind of what that means, an environmental education or environmental action project, when in reality it can be civic engagement, it can be sort of everyday choices, or community projects and partnerships, or restoration direct of the environment, greening campuses. And then we also shared how those action projects can kind of be on a spectrum in terms of implementation. So if somebody's like, oh, I really want to do something to address food waste because it's a driver of climate change, well, there's that sort of milder end of the spectrum of maybe it's just a campaign to have people take what they know they'll eat and go back for seconds rather than loading up more food than they're going to eat, versus a more uh, bigger problem action project where you're looking at how can we redistribute our food waste to partners so that people who need the food can have it. Um, so more complex projects, but thinking about what's a an entry point project. So it's good to realize there's a spectrum within the type of project as well. Oops, here we go. And then we had people share the links to the highlights of projects from past years are all in the deck, as well as the classroom profiles. The mentor teachers introduced what their project was, what was successful, where they saw their project on that spectrum, and what advice they would give themselves. And the slides from projects are also in this deck if you just want to look at them that way. So the examples are here. I'm just going to pop out and skip those, but that's something you can explore. Oh, there we go. So the mentor teachers highlights decks. And then after that was just a bit of planning time. And this quote is a good one I want to end on. This idea of starting from where you are, not where you wish you were. So there's, this is something we want everybody to feel success with. And so you're going to feel more successful if you're starting where you are with the capacity you're at now and finding a way to take action that will work within your current context. And every teacher in the program so far has been able to do that. And it's so exciting to celebrate together. Every project, big and small scope, is equally important and valid. And so the impacts we're having as a community on students' lives is amazing. And this group of teachers is so dedicated and inspiring. I'm really excited that you're joining and look forward to seeing you on Sunday for day 2 of the kickoff. Yeah, the end of the day was just a little sit spot planning time for folks. And then we will see you. Let me stop sharing. See you on Sunday. Feel free to email you if you have any questions. Thanks very much for listening.